Hey. My eyes are right here. Hi, I'm Kamiko, and what can I say? I like Silas, and my love language is spending several months working on a costume and putting all these silly little details into it. So, naturally, I had to make the most iconic of them all, Scarlet Passion. This is all from the game Love and Deepspace, if you aren't aware of that, even though you clicked on this video. But with that being said, let's get started with the design, shall we? So I am an artiste, if you will, and let's be real, there's a couple of pieces in the design I don't actually like. So I redesigned them, and here is what I came up with. So most of the design element changes are going to be in the corset and in the skirt. I love having a large skirt, and I personally think her skirt isn't big enough. So her skirt is large. Oh, her bodice. Oh, like, why does it open in the front? Why is it black and the skirt is red? Why is there gold in it when there's no gold anywhere else on the cosplay? It just... and the very last detail is, yes, she has wings, because she's a dragon. Why wouldn't she have wings? With that being said, we need to make some undergarments to really flesh out the shape of this design since it is very dramatic.
Let's make some undershorts first. To start off, I'm modifying this pattern from Dr. Cos. Now I've sized this up to the extra large and added about 3 extra inches on both sides when cutting the panels, and this still didn't fit me. So keep that in mind if you end up using this pattern. I mean, I can't complain that much since it was free. I decided to use a French seam for the base pieces. I tried this previously with my Aerith bloomers and they worked out great, so I'll try it again here.
Bless French seam!
The next thing to do is to add the elastic casings. For the waistband and the hem of the shorts, they are going to get double fold hemmed in order to create the casing. And for the leg band, I'm going to sew down this twill tape to create its casing too.
One, two, three, 4, 5, and 6.
Next is my least favorite part, the ruffle. I've cut 6 panels that are twice the length of my pants and sewn 2 of each together into tubes to get the 3 ruffles I need. All of these ruffles are going to be French seamed so that they have a nice finish on the inside. Next, I am going to serge the ruffle pieces, and then hem them afterwards, because this is a comp build, but you could probably skip this step and just get away with serging them. Next, I am going to gather all of these ruffle pieces with a long straight stitch, and then gather it by hand. You can use 2 stitches to make this part easier, but I'm lazy. I'm using Taylor's chalk and pins to map out where the ruffles go, but let's be honest, nothing can save me from the chaos that's about to occur. While I sew this, I will say these are completely and entirely optional for my build, but I do still highly recommend making these. Ruffle bloomers are a great alternative to petticoats, or you can double them up with a petticoat for maximum poof.
What I present to you is the frilly bloomer.
Now we have some very adorable bloomers. For this specific costume, they're just going to be a very cute modesty layer for my costume. But since this is done, let's move on, shall we?
Now, before you judge my hairstyle, ask yourself, have you ever just been sewing and then just feel something crawling around your neck and then you're just like, oh, what is that? Like you think it's a bug? Or it's just kind of touching you, like that creepy guy who won't leave you alone in the city. That is why I clipped them out of the way. Anyway, so now that the bloomers are done, we need to work on the next thing, which is the hoop skirt. Now I actually had no intention of making any kind of undergarments for this cosplay when I first started designing it. But after I got my fabric for the cosplay, the dull bridal satin, the brocade, the silk satin, and the organza, I quickly realized this skirt is going to be very heavy. So in order for it to give that nice full bell shape that I want, it would need some kind of structure under it. And I plan on wearing this hopefully to MomoCon, which is one of the hottest times of the year for Georgia. So I quickly decided I would make a hoop skirt. We are gonna get started on this hoop skirt, and it should be a pretty simple rinse and repeat. So let's get started.
This is going to give me the bell-shaped silhouette that I want for my skirt. This one is basically just a shorter version of the hoop skirt I made for my Aerith cosplay. I am using grosgrain ribbon for the bone casings this time around. They get sewn together chain stitch style to make the process go by faster. Next is the waistband. Unfortunately, I don't have heat and bond like last time, so I'm subbing in interfacing for the strength layer. It's also getting flatlined to another layer of cotton because I'm paranoid. The twill tape ribbon closures are sandwiched in with a straight stitch. The boning is temporarily put in to map out where it will sit on the ribbons, then it is taken out when everything is pinned. Last time I made a hoop skirt, I hand sewed all of the boning channels. This time I'm trying it with my machine. I think hand sewing is easier as you have more control, but taking out the boning and sewing by machine is much faster. Just way more finicky. Once all of the channels are sewn, the hoop skirt is basically done. So let's work on the petticoat next, shall we? For the petticoat, I'm using Kiralee Cosplay's mini petticoat tutorial for making this piece, except I use 60 yards of 12-inch length organza. I highly recommend getting pre-cut organza if you're anything like me and can't cut this fabric in a straight line to save your life. This is my pile of organza, 30 yards. This took about 30 minutes, 20 minutes to serge everything. It was not as bad as the longer petticoat that I made for Aerith. This one was actually not that bad to serge. In this petticoat, there are 4 total layers, as both the first and the second tier are folded in half. The second tiers create quite a large amount of volume at the bottom thanks to this technique. Kiralee's patented lazy lady method requires pinning the petticoat at certain lengths and then pleating as you go, but I would highly recommend watching her videos to get a more comprehensive tutorial on this. Now for this petticoat, it is quite a lot of extra volume, so you can see just how crazy the process gets as you keep adding all of the layers. But slowly and surely it gets done. In most cases, petticoats either create poof or are used to smooth out boning channels in hoop skirts. In this project particularly, I'm using this petticoat for both.
Okay, so this is what the bloomers look like. This is the corset that I made for Aerith. So this is the cage skirt. I think it's super cute. I really like the bell shape, and I really like the shape for Lolita as well. So I think this will work quite nicely for my cosplay and for Lolita. Last thing is the petticoat. Now, I don't actually know if I'm gonna need this, but I figured I would try it on. Okay, that is huge. That is huge.
Even though I'm clearly not trusting the process, all of the structural undergarments are done, so we can actually get started on the cosplay itself. So let's get started on the skirt, shall we?
I'm supposed to be showing you fabric right now, but do you want to see my Love and Deepspace merch? This was from my friend. Technically, it's not a Love and Deepspace thing. I don't think she knows what that is, but you can't tell me this isn't Bippy. Isn't he so cute? The worst part is that I am very allergic to birds. If you know like Adrian Agreste allergy to birds from like Miraculous Ladybug, like that's how bad my allergy is. Like birds just have to fly by and then I'm like dying. So like if Mephi was real, I couldn't appreciate and love him. Anyway, so the first thing is this silk satin. This was $32 a yard, so this is the real deal. So this is going to be for the corset and for the bustle of the skirt. For the bottom part of the skirt, I opted for a dull bridal satin. I just love the low sheen of it, and it's actually very heavy, so this skirt is gonna weigh like 8 pounds when I'm done with it. The next thing I bought is for the second layer, which is the darker red color. And this is a brocade fabric that I purchased. Now, what you're actually looking at is the back of the fabric, and I'm gonna fold it in half so you get what I'm talking about. You kind of see what I mean? This is the front, this is the back. Personally, I like the look of the back better. I just think it has a more even payoff. I don't know, you might think I'm crazy on that one, but we're gonna use this side of the fabric. I have cut out a total of 5 half circle skirts of this, 5 of this, and then 5 of the satin. So while the design originally called for 3 circle skirts, I spent a lot of money on that fabric down there. So they're only going to be 2.5 circle skirts, and that'll just have to do. Before we move on to the skirts, since I have already cut them out, we need to talk embroidery. Now, I am not very good at vectorizing files, as you might know from Rosa Not Miku. I am more of an artiste. So what I basically did is eyeballed all of the designs. For the black skirt, I am just going to do a 3x3 pattern. This is technically a continuous pattern, but again, no. So this is going to be the file that I use, and it's just going to get embroidered on each of the pleats. They're going to not be continuous. The last one are these two, which are upside down. These two are the continuum designs on the bustle. And then the last one that I haven't finished working on is the dragon design for the corset. Again, I'm not super confident it's gonna look nice, but I can try. So let's get started.
Alheli.s on Instagram had much clearer files for the skirt than the game references, so I did use their files as a reference to draw out my own. I'm working with a 4x4 hoop constraint, so I decided to make one file for the skirt instead of a continuous design. I mean, could you imagine rehooping all of that? No thanks. Once all of the files are embroidered, we can finish the skirt. No, I mean the first skirt. We still have 2 left. For maximum poof, I'm using horsehair braid for the hem. My sister had this 4-inch braid literally underneath her bed, so I felt obligated to steal it and use it. It is sewn to the front of the skirt and then pressed liberally before I stitch the braid in place.
What's got me watching this Chinese drama called Love Game in Eastern Fantasy, and oh my god, it is so good. I am absolutely hooked on this, so if you need something to watch that. I am doing some seam binding just because I don't like the fuzziness of the selvage edge, and I have to do seam binding on the horsehair braid anyway, so I just have everything kind of pinned. Are you gonna focus or not? Fine, I don't want you to focus. Anyway, I'm just going to go through and hand sew these down, and I probably should have done this way before sewing in all of the tacks and stuff, but better late than never, I say.
Next is finishing the seam. I cut all of my panels for the skirt on the selvage, which doesn't fray, but it's, ugly. I figured I'd try a historical technique called seam binding, so I'm encasing the ugly edges with this pretty satin ribbon from my stash. This gets pinned in and then sewn together with a quick running stitch. I think it makes a huge difference.
Ooh, ignore that I haven't pressed this seam. Ooh. This looks so much better than the, like, fuzzy part of the selvage. I bet you thought I was done though, huh? No. I have to hand sew all of this freaking horsehair down. All of it. All the way up to here. And there's 2 more of these freaking seams that I didn't see. So I have to bind 2 more seams, and I have to bind this, and I have to bind all this shit. So no, I am not done.
Unfortunately, stealing from my sister did come back to bite me. Since this braid is so wide, it doesn't want to lie flat, so I have to hand sew the entire hem. I'm going to gather the braid as I go using a prick stitch so it is nearly invisible from the front of the skirt. But this takes forever since I have literally multiple circle skirts worth of a hem to do. So, see you in the next 3 hours. Let's work on the second skirt next. Since it's essentially assembled the exact same way as the first, I'm going to ramble on why I even chose this brocade in the first place. Now, MC has a lot of designs on her skirt, and I feared that embroidering all 3 layers would end up looking redundant and busy. While the brocade isn't the exact design of her skirt, I think it artistically reinterprets the original design and adds some much needed variety. Secondly, in Love and Deepspace, Silas's dragon storyline has a strong connection to flowers. I won't spoil anything else, but I think the brocade is a great way to both tell a story and reimagine the design. Both layers are knife pleated. The pleats go in opposite directions from the front, just like in the OG reference. At least I think. I can't really tell. Anyway, the pleats are pinned in place and then sewn with a straight stitch. Now this alone won't be enough to hold that pleated shape, so I'm going through and tacking down every single pleat. This might seem unnecessary, but this will ensure that I don't have to constantly adjust the skirt while I'm wearing it.
Okay, so I just finished patterning out the bustle, and I have made some executive decisions in my cosplay. With the dull bridal satin, it's a very heavyweight fabric, so it's very heavy duty, and the pattern puckered a lot when I was embroidering it. Now, I don't know if it's my hoop or whatever, but usually like tightening the fabric helps, but I don't know what about my hoop. I think it's broken, but it's not really giving me enough tension to make the fabric stop puckering. You can see it improve as the layers go around, but I couldn't completely get rid of it. And it's okay because it's black and, you know, it's the 3rd layer, so I think it's a little bit harder to see. But the bustle is right in your face, so I can't have that puckering. Problem 2 is that the bustle is made out of real silk, and silk is a very annoying fabric to work with because the fabric threads can snag while you're sewing it. And I'm sure you can imagine doing 6,000 stitches in one area on silk. So I am doing something very similar to what I did for Rosa Not Miku, and I am making freestanding lace. I am really happy with how this test subject came out, so let me show you how I made this and let's work on the bustle.
I'm making my freestanding lace with water-soluble stabilizer and tulle fabric. There are about 22 in total, so I'm gonna be here for a while.
Oh, what? This? You mean this fancy new ergonomic chair that I got? Yeah, this old thing. It's less cute than my other chair, but oh my god, I am in my mid-20s and my back hurts. Get yourself an ergonomic chair. Your back will thank you. I have 14 of these panels done. That means I only have 10 left to do. And I also just noticed this looks like a heart. I think that's cute. Anyway, let's get back to it. I needed to stand up. So, yeah, let's get back to it.
I didn't want to risk cutting into my very expensive silk, so I decided to make a cotton mock-up of the bustle beforehand. This is also a circle skirt pattern. I just adjusted the back to be longer and rounded the sides to have that bustle feel to it.
Jump scare. You're used to seeing me with bangs. But anyway, I am here to bring some bad news. So, this is the silk fabric that I bought for my bustle. Yes, it is real silk. And as you can see, it is extremely wrinkled. And I bet you're sitting there going, oh, Kamiko, you just need to iron that. Shh! I've spent the last 2 days trying to iron this silk. It's a natural fiber. So with all natural fibers, there comes like a temperamentalness to it. Washing it can do that too, apparently. I have never been told to not wash a fabric before sewing it before, and now I'm being told after I've done it that you should not machine wash silk. So basically what I spent all of yesterday doing is attempting to bring back the nice fabric that I was working with. Unfortunately, I think I caught it too late. This is again from multiple attempts of ironing with the damp cloth, and unfortunately, I think the fabric is just stuck like this now. So it is with an extremely heavy heart that I'm thinking of putting a pin in using this fabric. It's a sad update, but an update nonetheless. So I'm going to get back into the kitchen and try to cook. I went to Tomato in Nippori. They are a very huge chain that has 5 floors worth of fabric. I went online and I found this twinkle satin, and I figured I would check it out in the store and see if they had something like this that I could use as an alternative. They did not have it, but the lady did recommend me something similar, which I bought. I think it has a very juicy feel to it, and I feel like they look very similar. But while this one is a silk satin, this one is like a polyester rayon fabric, so it's not going to wrinkle nearly as much as the silk, and it's also going to be a lot easier to iron. So I'm pretty hopeful that this will be a nice alternative for the cosplay. And I love the like mirror sheen on it. It almost kind of reminds me of like molten magma or something like that, like lava, which I feel like gives dragon vibes. So let's see how this looks on the bustle.
I'm still pretty bummed about ruining that silk fabric, but I gotta admit, these fabrics look so ethereal together. They just, they work so much better together, I feel. So let's finish this bustle, shall we? The lining is actually the ruined silk and some organza fabric that I also bought for this cosplay and didn't use. I didn't expect this, but they both act as a great structural layer to the bustle. I wasn't expecting it, but I'm not complaining. These get sewn right sides together, and I also sandwich in some horsehair braid, but it really didn't need it. I actually took this out later, as well as the top stitching I did later on too. But once the bustle is thoroughly ironed, it's ready for the embroidery patches. All of the lace pieces are trimmed down as close to the thread as possible without compromising the stitches. Afterwards, I glue them to the finished bustle with gem tack. Maybe be normal and either sew these or use fabric glue, but I ran out, so... For the waistband, the first 2 layers are sewn together, and the waistband is made with more of the dull bridal satin cut on the grain and interfaced. Hopefully that'll give it some strength to hold this beast together. At some points the waistband is so thick that I had to resort to using the hand wheel to sew everything together. It's sewn right sides together first and then stitched in the ditch later. For the red layer, I actually initially made it a separate layer from the skirt, but then decided to sew it to the other 2 layers afterwards. So what you're seeing here is actually me sewing it down. But when I went to fix it, I had to completely hand sew the bustle and the new waistband in completely by hand. At that point, it was too thick to sew through my machine. But I think the red layers look a lot more cohesive than the black waistband. Afterwards, I'm going to tack the bustle down to the skirt. This way it still has a flounce, but more of a controlled flounce. I'm going to sew these in with some simple whip stitches so that the skirt holds its shape nice. It has a hook and bar and 2 snaps, that way everything stays together nicely. The very last detail is all of the rhombus gems on the front of the skirt. I actually didn't have any, but Amazon was going to charge $20 to buy some, so I decided to just paint some that I had with red nail polish. No one will ever know. After these are painted, these get sewn directly to the skirt. And then, to add a little bit of extra flair, I decided to use these leftover bugle beads to sew around all of the gems. And with that, the skirt is finally done.
You know what time it is.
We need all of the undergarments and the finished skirt in order to start on the bodice. I learned this the hard way with other costumes I've made in the past. Also, if you're curious how I made the corset, check out my Aerith video. With everything made on, I'm using the duct tape method to create a pattern for my bodice. Afterwards, I'm going to draw all of my seam lines and my center front since it's just nice to reference. I will say the process went a little awry because I was too lazy to transfer my duct tape pattern to paper, so learn from my mistakes, shall we? I used the lining fabric for my mock-up in case it goes well. Well, it didn't, but bodices don't use up that much fabric luckily. After a few adjustments, mostly to the back of the corset and to the sides, it's ready for me to make the final bodice.
Okay, so I have finalized my pattern, so now I'm gonna cut everything out. This is just some remnant denim fabric that I bought as samples for dyeing for my Yuna cosplay, but corsets don't really need a lot of fabric, so I had just enough for this. Ideally, I would have done a bias cut on this panel as well as these 3, but these 2 are the ones going around my bust, and this one's going around my back. So I'm hoping I can get away with cutting this one on the grain, and then the bias cut.
After all the pattern pieces are cut, these all get flatlined with my serger. This didn't go too well. The red fabric is super lightweight and likes to shift around a lot, so I did get some puckers. Next time I'm going to try basting the pieces by hand to see if that helps. Anyway, all of the pieces are sewn right sides together and then pressed open. For corsets and bodices, I cannot stress enough how important ironing is to your garment coming out right. With the base complete now, I can start to work on the embellishments. First, there is this beautiful design on the center front of the bodice, and I want this to be the focal point of the costume. Upon further inspection, it is actually a dragon, which is a really cool design choice. Since I drew it by hand, I decided to be cheeky and throw a couple of hearts into the design. I first did the embroidery on the matching dull bridal satin, but not only was the sizing off, it also reminded me that I have some beautiful sparkly leather hide in my stash. This looks way cooler in my opinion. The design is embroidered on more tulle and then glued to the leather applique piece using more tacky glue. Gem tack. I need to get some fabric glue. I'm deciding to satin stitch the applique piece in. This would have gone way better if I had heat and bond. The reoccurring theme of this project is I need to buy more heat and bond before my next project. I wanted to add a little bit more sparkle to the front of the embroidery since the backing is so sparkly, so I decided to add some silver Swarovski crystals to the embroidery piece, and this time I'm actually using the gem tack for what it's for, which is tacking gems onto the applique piece. Now, this bodice looks really cool on its own, but there's way more pieces on the original design. I considered a lot of ways to tackle this, especially considering that MC is really tall and I don't have enough real estate to add in all of those details. I started off by trying to add some beading, and while I did like the sparkle factor, I thought it was really hard to see against the color shifting of the base fabric. It also really wanted to highlight the puckering that is really prominent in panel 2 specifically. So I'm definitely going to need to go back to the drawing board. I did some brainstorming last night, and I'm deciding on maybe doing like this pleated Bertha type situation. I used the underside of the red fabric, which is on here, and then the last of the the dull bridal satin scraps. Essentially, there's a couple things going on at play here. For one, I wanted to incorporate some of the pleating because it's in the skirt. Two, there's a lot of like designs that are kind of swirling off the sides, and I think the pleating does a good job of doing that. And then if I end up liking this, I can use the beading on top of the pleats to tack it down at the front. So I'm very happy with this. It took a while to figure out, but I really like how that looks, so we're gonna keep going. After I drape the pleating and get a shape that I'm happy with, all of the plating gets prick stitched in place by hand. While I'm at it, I'm going to bead the edges of the satin stitched applique. Not required, but very pretty. Side note, something I learned from Sarcasm Hime is that bugle beads are often cut super sharply, especially cheaper beads, which can over time cut the threads of all of your hard work. So I always make sure to separate any bugle beads I want to use with Z beads. These chrome colored ones should do the trick. There's like a really cool vine lined texture on the original design of the bodice, so I'm also going to use beading to recreate that design on my bodice, or at least something kind of like it. I decided to use these really cool chrome purple beads and more of the red bugle beads as well. Beading and hand embroidery are so rewarding to me because it forces me to slow down and take a breath. This is especially helpful with builds like this one, where I have a deadline and I feel myself starting to rush things. After working on this for several days, the beading is finally done, and I think it was well worth the extra effort. With all of the embellishments done, let's finish this bodice, shall we? Taking some more inspiration from the ballet bodice construction, I'm using cording for the edges. I ran out of the dull bridal satin at this point, so I'm using brocade and 3 layers of organza to get the proper opacity. Definitely not ideal, but it was free and it kind of works. I drew out my seam allowance with tailor's chalk from the edge of the corded stitch. Then I felt for the edge of the bodice fabric as I pinned it to make sure that the line hit where the bodice edge was. Next, I just sewed it down as normal, making sure not to hit a bone while I'm at it. This time I actually had enough fabric to fold over twice and whip stitch down by hand. Great! The bodice doesn't need much support, but there are a lot of pieces going on it regardless, so I'm going to add some boning, just to be on the safe side. All I had in my stash to make the bone casings was this velvet ribbon. Not my first choice, but we're not building a bridge here. The boning is just leftover synthetic baleen from my previous projects. The edges are rounded with scissors and then enclosed in masking tape to keep them from cutting me or the fabric for that matter. I'm deciding to stitch these in with the herringbone stitch. It's a common ballet bodice construction method and I really like using it. The last thing I'm going to do is for the ribbon, I'm going to prick stitch this in by hand. Is on the roster for today. I'm going to be working on those little chains. So they're going to be detachable with these teeny tiny little safe pins that I have. That way I can pin them to the bodice, and if they get on my nerves, I can take them off really easy. I have some leftover chain. I'm assuming this is probably from Shadowheart. This looks like it should either be not enough or just enough. So I'm just going to connect these all together with these jump rings that I have. And then I have some leftover beads from Aerith, so I might like feed these through here maybe, and then add a hook and then connect them this way maybe.
I just think that they have a super cool style to them, and I think they'll match the cosplay really well, especially with the floral brocade. And then she also has gems on her thing, so I was going to probably feed these through some of these rings as well. Maybe. I'm kind of gonna just follow my heart.
In order to turn these beads into charms, I use some extra jump rings and sew them into the beads so that they act as charms. It was very finicky to sew, but once again, it was free, so I'm not complaining. For the red charms at the front, I just used more of the leftover gems from this tablecloth that I thrifted. I'll have you know that these were much easier to sew than the rose beads. These waist chains get attached to the safety pin closure, and that gets pinned to the inside of the bodice. And for the last detail, I add this resin gem with an EVA foam trim around it. And I promise, that's the last part of the bodice. So let's move on, shall we? What we're working on next is what I'm going to call the tail bow. Okay, so there are 2 extra bustles on the back of the skirt. The gray one is ugly, so I'm not adding it. It's my opinion. The second one, I don't have enough of the organza or the silk fabric to make it that long, so I'm making water faux bow tails instead. And this is kind of the pattern I ended up with for that piece. It's very similar to the patterning of the bustle. For the bow tails, I'm using a scaled up cosmic cotillier pattern that I cut out of the brocade and the red fabric. Once again, I don't have heat and bond, so I'm using horsehair braid and a pretty weak interfacing to give me the structure that I need. This actually worked really well, but I personally like heat and bond better. The horsehair braid can work in a pinch. I referenced Kiralee Cosplay's video on her waterfall tail bows to get an idea of how I wanted to create mine, but it's very similar to the bustle. I used the red fabric as the fashion layer and then the organza and the ribbon silk as the lining. Then the cut patterns are bag lined.
Well, do you want to drive all the way to Taco Bell? Cause yeah, that's what I thought.
They need to replace that McDonald's with Taco Bell.
No, they don't. Bell is nasty.
I haven't even had Taco Bell for real.
Yes, I have.
If you don't have a sibling, I wouldn't expect you to understand this, but arguing about whether Taco Bell is good or not is a canon sibling event. Anyway, after the tails and the bow loops are finished, I'm going to hand sew them together. And look at how cute this bow is. Well, it's about to get even better because, like I said, this is a tail bow, not just a bow.
Okay, this is how it looks. And then this is the bow that I made. It doesn't have the closure yet, so I'm just gonna kind of hold it so you guys can see it, but I can't.
For the tail, I watched several fursuiting and costuming videos. Ultimately, the technique I chose was the most similar to the one our Beau Real Key used in their video. The base fabric for the tail structure is more of the brocade fabric. It's literally all I have left at this point. It's cut on the bias from when I trimmed the skirt, so in its current state it's not suitable as a structural layer. I'm going through and quilting the fabric in hopes of stabilizing it as much as I can, as well as serging it. Once again, I think this would have been more secure if I had heat and bond. After the tail pattern piece is prepped, I use it as a guide for cutting out the upholstery foam. I don't need my tail to be that thick, so after I cull out all the pieces, I'm going to cut them in half again. Then they are glued to the fabric using tacky glue, as the strength layer and hot glue is used to hold everything in place while the tacky glue dries. The nice thing about this upholstery foam is that it's super lightweight and squishy, so it's very fun to play with, but it's also good for having an articulated tail, so it's a great option. Look at all of the movement it has. Nice. I have this leftover velour fabric from Rosa Not Miku that I didn't end up using, but I think the floral texture kind of looks like scales or magma, so I think it'll work great for this cosplay. I use the base as a guide to cut out the pattern and then sew it together using elastic thread and a zigzag stitch. The hard part was shimmying this onto the tail.
I apologize in advance for not filming how I made this super cute smocking. Anyway, it's 1-inch smocking and it's a 60-inch panel. Don't they look like food? I love this. Okay, let's move on to the rest of the tail.
Once it was on, I'm going to add this smocking panel I made. It's called arrow smocking and it's often used to mimic dragon scales. I insisted on it being somewhere on this cosplay, and the tail seemed like the best contender. The panel gets hand sewn to the tail directly. Since smocking gathers the fabric, the end result isn't as crisp as I would like. Also, I have a huge stash of random seed beads that I'd like to use up, so I'm going to bead around the entirety of the smocking panel. I start off with larger beads and then file down to a smaller size at the end. I'm going to lie and say it was a stylistic choice and not because I ran out of the larger ones. After all of the beading is done, the bow is going to get attached to the tail to create the tail bow. I feel like it will be easier to put everything on if there's less pieces, you know? I don't know if this closure will end up working well with the corset, but I guess I'll find out the hard way later. Anyway, here is the result. Also, does it kind of look like whipped cream to you? Is it just me? It looks like whipped cream. Anyway, let's move on to the wing, shall we? Let's move on to the wings. Our Boruki has a video on how to make wings that look awesome too, so I closely followed this tutorial for making my own wings. Now, for some dumb reason, MC doesn't actually have wings, even though Silas does. The lack of wings not only lowers the coolness rating of this costume by like 40%, but with the costume, it just looks unbalanced without wings, so let's fix that, shall we? I'm using a combination of my own design and Silas's wing design to make a pattern. Apparently, his canon wingspan probably goes over 12 feet in length, but I'm bringing this to a con with almost 70,000 attendees, and I don't want wings that large. I settled on about 20 to 25 inches, long enough that they're visible from the front, but not so much that they run the risk of, getting smacked at the con, hopefully. After the pattern is drawn and cut, I first use it as a base to cut out the fabric for the wings. His wings are red and black, and unfortunately I don't have any more black fabric in my stash, so I'm using the backing of the red fabric and overlaying it with the black power mesh to get some opacity. Even though this wrinkled silk doesn't really work for the skirt and the bodice, I actually think it's the perfect texture for imitating wings, so I'm going to use this as the fashion layer. We'll just say the wrinkles were on purpose. These get sewn right sides together and then turned inside out to make a bag casing for the wings. Next, I need to make the skeleton. The video I'm following recommends low density EVA foam, but unfortunately my foam order hasn't arrived yet, so all I have are these high density foam scraps left over from my Una staff. I'm going to cut out my design into 4 different pieces, and then cut them in half in hopes of cutting down on the weight. They are also beveled at a 45-degree angle to give it its rounded shape. Now, another thing I haven't received yet is my blade replacement, so I am struggle bussing to cut into this thick EVA foam. The video recommends sanding the EVA foam directly, but I'm really not happy with my jagged cuts, so I'm going to layer everything in foam clay first. This stuff is great if you're bad at EVA foam like I am. It self-levels and smooths down very easily with water. Here is the wing. All I have done is just do one pass of the foam clay, so it will need to be sanded and then primed. And this is also not glued either. I just sat it down to kind of get an idea of how I wanted the wings to go. Honestly, even without the sanding, I think it looks really good, but obviously I am going to clean up a lot of these edges.
once it's fully cured, but that's the problem with foam clay, that it takes forever to dry, so I will see you in like 30 years after this dries.
After this sat out for 24 hours, I take it to the garage with my Dremel tool. Be sure to wear a respirator when you sand EVA foam. Then I use my heat gun to heat seal the EVA foam and to make sure the spine lays as flat as possible. You want to work with it while it's warm so that it cools in the shape. Now to attach the spine to the wings. First, I bevel cut into the spine to make a spot for the wire to slot into. I use 12 gauge wire since it's literally all I have. This gets hot glued in place, and then the spine is glued to the fabric wings. The video recommends either aluminum or PVC pipe for the base of the wings, but I don't have that, so I'm going to twist 2 more of the aluminum wires together to get a hopefully strong enough base for the wings. To cover up the wire, I actually used some rounded styrofoam tube that I also cut into in order for the wire to slot in. Once the wire is covered, I glued this to the back of the wings to stabilize them.
Here are the wings. I am just trying them on with the base corset. I have made wings before. I made some wings for my Nightmare Moon cosplay, and you have to be very wide with the armature wire base. Where is it? Yeah, it's right here. You see how wide it comes out? If you do a very narrow one, the wings tend to shift more, but they're staying pretty close to me just with the help of the wider armature wire. I would say these are pretty stable. I kind of bent them forward so that if I find that they're moving around, I can fix it. It also means I can remove them and put them on myself, and I can just easily adjust it the closer it is to my body. And it means that I have less arm room as far as like hitting people at the con, which is another thing I'm worried about. Like I'm really bad at EVA foam, is the point. And the fact that I can make something that looks this good means that it's possible for you to do it too. Well, let's keep moving on and finish these wings, shall we?
After the second phase of foam clay and sanding, here's how the wings are looking. I also added some talons that are on Silas's wings too. Technically, there's multiple, but I was lazy and only did one. These are going to get primed with Cosflex first. My wings are a little rough, so I'm going to add some extra layers to be on the safe side. After, the wings are finally ready to be painted. I'm using black acrylic paint. Luckily, it doesn't need nearly as many layers to get opacity. Once they are painted, I'm going to seal everything. Duraclear is best used watered down with a 1:1 ratio with water. I thought I would try using a sponge to add some cool textures to the wing, but not only did it not work, it just wasted way more primer than I needed. Oh well. Despite the extra layers of primer, I still got a pretty uneven texture on my wings, and I probably needed to sand it a bit more at the beginning, but not to worry, I have the perfect solution. Glitter. I used tacky glue and a paintbrush to apply a thin layer to the wings, and then shake the loose glitter onto the spine. I've done this so many times in elementary school, I feel like an expert on this technique. And here is the final result. The wire isn't as secure as I would like it to be, but it has nice movement that makes it look like the wings are moving. And here is how it looks with the glitter compared to the acrylic paint. It's a fun touch if you ask me. Overall, I'm really proud of how these wings turned out. let's move on, shall we? Let's work on the undergarments next. Now, unlike the ones that are used to support the bodice and the skirt, this is going to mimic all of the scales that are decorated throughout MC's arms and legs. When I looked at pre-made costumes online, it looks like all of the scales are just kind of tucked under the straps of the bodice, which doesn't seem very secure or easy to put on yourself, so that's why I'm making garments instead. I started off with a power mesh pattern for both the top and the leg portion, but the top one is gradient dyed, so it kind of makes her hands look like they are corrupted. Cool, right? If you want some of my tips on how to get a clean gradient, check out my uni video for that. For both the top and the tights, they're getting a velour insert within it. The tights, it is going to be a sock portion, and then for the top, it is going to be a glove. Everything is going to get stitched with a zigzag stitch and elastic thread because I have it, but the machine really likes to eat this stuff, so be careful. A waistband gets added to both the top and the tights so that they stay secure to my corset. So you want to make sure this is to your corset waist measurements and not your natural measurements. Here is how the top looks so far, and the tights look pretty similar. So let's move on to the scales. I embroidered some more arrow smocking. There was a tutorial on YouTube about how to sew arrow smocking in a straight line, so I made some ribbon fabric strips of leftover fabric, and I'm going to sew it to the top and the tights directly. For the neckline, I can just sew it directly on my dress form, but unfortunately I have to wear this as I sew it on the rest of my body, as it needs to be fully fleshed out and stretched to the proper shape so that the smocking doesn't obstruct movement while I'm wearing the top. So this part definitely got a little awkward for the leg portion. The next thing I made is a neckline for the top. I decided to opt for this ribbon braid and some beading to add a little bit more cohesion to the scales. And here is how everything looks. It looks like the ribbon is practically dancing along my skin, and I think the color shift of the fabric really adds to that factor too. I also love the addition of the ribbon braid, as I think it adds a lot of added detail. I know this doesn't look like the perfect color match to me right now, but just you wait. I also added this cute resin gem. It's made the same way as the one on the bodice, and this gets E6000 down. Next, we need to add the pauldron. One of her scales looks small enough that the smocking can count for the other, but the other one is a lot larger. So to start, I drafted a quick pattern and then cut it out of both some pleather and sparkly leather scraps. Next, I'm going to go through and top stitch the layers together. This process is slow and tedious, but it gets you the best result if you do it that way, so it's well worth the wait. After the stitching is complete, I'm going to go through and trim the pleather down. I don't want to accidentally cut the leather, so I'm taking this slow and using my embroidery scissors to cut right up against the edge. There is going to be a top layer that goes on this, but I'll talk about that a little bit more when we start working on the horns. Next is the choker. I'm starting off with some more of that lace that's on the bodice for cohesion, and it is basted to a twill tape layer since twill tape is super strong but also a lot more comfortable than some other fabrics. I have sensitive skin. This gets top stitched down, and then I'm going to cut off the excess lace as I only want the heart-shaped lace to show through and not the daisy lace. Then, after both layers are sewn together, I'm going to top stitch down another layer of twill tape. After this is sewn, I add some extra twill tape to the end so I can tie it behind my neck for the closure. I also added some more of the gems from the tablecloth that I thrifted, and off camera I added another one of those gems. It's basically the same one that I made for the skirt. But with that, the choker is done, so let's move on.
I have this bodacious boot. Now she has very long legs, and I do not. These would completely cover up the actual shape of the design if I left them at the length they are now. But what I'm going to do is this. That way, it is like a faux ankle boot. It should probably go down a little bit lower just because the socks come down pretty low, but you see, the lower you do it, the more of a crease you have right here. But this means I don't have to buy more shoes. I am so tired of working on this cosplay. There are gonna be over 15 pieces when I'm done, and I'm tired. Anyway, let's make some boot covers, shall we?
I'm making a duct tape pattern of the base shoe and then transferring it to more pleather fabric. Next, I'm going to sew one of the side seams together in preparation for a closure. I figured zippers would be the easiest option, so these are sewn upside down to have enough room for my foot to fit in. But honestly, a separating zipper would be a better option. I just didn't want to buy one. Afterwards, prepared some little applique pieces, and then these get top stitched down to the boots. And then I also added some EVA foam binding to the boot covers for some last finishing touches. We're down to some of the few accessories now, so let's get started. This is officially my third pair of gusseted gloves, but if you want a more in-depth look at how I make them, check out my pink diamond video. I'm using the Dr. Cos extra large glove pattern.
So this is the only thing I don't like about the Dr. Cos pattern. I'm usually around like a medium women's or a small men's glove. Look at where my finger starts. I'm gonna have to cut that whole thing off. It's frustrating because when I purchased a smaller size, this was so small it didn't even fit over my fingers. So I bought the larger size for that reason, but the length is too long. I mean, it's really easy to fix, but it is frustrating. Anyway, I'm gonna keep going. Okay, I have no idea how this happened. I know I cut out everything correctly, but for some reason, I ended up with 2 left gloves. There is no way I'm remaking these gusseted gloves. I'm gonna have to whip stitch this part closed with like a little scrap piece of fabric. That way it doesn't look like it was cut open. But that just goes to show that gloves are hard. Gloves are hard and gloves are annoying.
After a quick hand stitch, the gusset mistake is fixed, so let's finish up these gloves.
There. Now it's like it never happened.
Some quick tidbits about these gloves. 1, the large was too small and the extra large was too roomy, so I'll probably have to look for a different pattern if I want to make gusseted gloves in the future. 2, gloves are hard. I actually re-sewed these twice and sewed the gussets in backwards, and this is my 3rd time sewing gloves, so don't let these short videos on gloves fool you. MC also has gauntlet armor, so I'm going to make that now. I started off with a paper pattern based on the shape of the original glove pattern, and then I adjusted it to have a pointed talon look since, you know, she's a dragon. So I cut all of those out of some leather scraps first, and then I'm going to hot glue this onto 2mm EVA foam. This is just going to make the second process a little bit easier. Once all of these are glued and they fully dry, I'm going to cut them out. I want this to be super precise, so I'm taking this slow as I cut them so I can get a nice clean cut. Next, we need to attach the gauntlets. I'm wearing extra gloves under this while I attach them for obvious safety reasons, but the reason that I used EVA foam is because it heats up and when it cools it holds its shape. So with the hot glue, it's going to heat up the EVA foam and get it to curl around my glove, which should give it a gauntlet look and feel. So I'm going to do this for every single gauntlet piece, and there's 3 for each finger, so there's a lot. Afterwards, the gloves look like this, and you could stop here, but she does have one extra detail that I need to add, which is the chains. Now, I actually ran out of chains at this point. I used all of the chains on the skirt, so I'm actually going to bead all of them to make them look like chains. So for that, I started off by using an awl to make an incision in the leather, and then I went through and beaded this afterwards to get a really cool chain effect. And here is how everything looks together. I'm really happy I opted to go for a pointed look for the the gauntlets, because I think it just really sells that dragon claw look. So yeah, the last thing we have to make is the wig, so let's get started. I have this lace front Arta wig that I bought secondhand. I have already used it for another cosplay, so it's already been crimped. First, my wig has a middle part, so I'm changing that to better match the style of MC. She also has bangs, so the hair gets trimmed after shaping. I also like my bangs to be a little bit wispy when they have more of a natural style like MC does. So I'm also going to use thinning shears to help with that. Then I curl them using my flat iron, although this flat iron gets up to 400 degrees and the temperature does not change, so I would not recommend this if you're using a cheaper wig. For some reason, this particular wig sheds and tangles really badly, so I'm going to curl the ends of the wig to help with that. Also, I think MC would look so cute with curls. I use flex rods to hold the hair in a curled shape and then hit this with my steamer. I recommend steaming it in a bag for an even better result. While I'm at it, I'm also going to steam the bangs and the part to help everything lay nicely. While the fibers are hot, I spray this with hairspray and then let it fully cool before taking the flex rods out. I'm also going to separate them to get a looser curl. Look at how cute and bouncy these curls are.
Okay, and that's the finished wig. Oh, I know that this is a little less exciting of a hairstyle, but the reason I wanted to do curls is because this wig tangles up so much, and I find the wigs that have these ringlet curls tangle a lot less. But since the hair is naturally straight, I wanted to do a little more of a looser curl to kind of emulate that. But with this just having less hair, this will be a lot easier to manage, especially with the dragon wings and the tail. So this will do.
Next is the dragon horns. I wasn't really sure what direction I was going to take for this, but I figured I would start with an armature wire base. So I drafted up a pattern and then bulked it out with aluminum foil and foam clay, but I didn't end up liking the result. Luckily, my sister came in to save the day. Literally that exact same day, she gave me a random bag of oven-dried clay, so I let my inner art kid out. Having a reference on hand, I slowly but surely built up the shape of all 6 horns. They are all separated, so that way I could draft them lying flat. I also went ahead and sculpted the pauldron as well. Afterwards, they get baked in the oven to set, and then they're ready for paint. These only needed about 2 coats to get opacity, then they also got the glitter treatment.
Okay, this is literally being held up by pins and gravity, so I am not going to move this around, but this is how the horns are turning out. I need to paint a few more coats on them, but I just wanted to pin them to see how everything was looking. And if you remember, this is what we started with. And they definitely go like more out, whereas her horns go back and up. So I'm really happy with how the clay turned out. I didn't think it was gonna work, but it was really fun to do. And I got the little gem portion right here. Anyway, let's keep working and finish oh crap. Oh no. Get back. Get back. I'm gonna finish painting these.
I wanted to use a headband to attach the horns to, so I thought it would be the easiest and most secure way to attach them. Here you can see me hot gluing it to a velveteen ribbon, and unfortunately this was not strong enough to hold up the weight of the horns. What I ended up doing instead was attaching all of the horns to a headband base with E6000. Then I trimmed the headband to get kind of a barrette clip attachment, and with hairpins, this stays on my head very well. The last thing is the chain and the gem get attached, and it's done.
I wanted to show you the horns. Look at how cool they are. So my sister randomly came home and gave me some oven dry clay and was just like, "Here!" And I was like, thanks? What am I gonna do with this? This is how the horns turned out. They are super rough, but they're supposed to be horns, so I'm not mad at it. And I also added the exact same glitter that is on the rest of the wings. And I added a cute little gem. This is the same one that's on the skirt as well. And I also used it for my tablecloth. While we're at it, this is how the pauldron is coming out. Basically, this is the backing that I made while making the boot covers, and then this is the piece that'll go over it. While I'm talking to you, I still haven't finished them yet, but who knows? They might already be finished yet by the time you're seeing this. But I really like how these came out. It's just, oh, look at that sparkle, man. I love that. I love that. So yeah, let's move on to the next thing, shall we?
And the very last detail are these cute earrings. With all 20 pieces out of the way, I am finally ready to become MC.
So, I'm in Masters now. I'm gonna be real with you. This has been the hardest video I've ever made. Now, that probably doesn't sound like a lot because I think I've only made about 26 videos at this point, but there was a reoccurring theme that I had when I was trying to make this video. And it's simply for the fact that I am at a complete loss of words. I've been struggling with what I've wanted to say for weeks, and what I have to say is not perfect. It's not perfectly curated as much as I would like it to be, but it's the best that I can give you. So here it is. Have you ever just had a dream that felt so far out of your reach, you couldn't even picture it happening to you in your mind? That was me with being a master level cosplayer. And I'm a master level cosplayer now. I've been competing for about 4 years and I have won some awards over that time. So I spent a couple of weeks contemplating that and was considering entering into Journeyman. Not because I thought my skills were at Journeyman level, but because I had so much experience under making cosplays that I was like, I'm probably gonna have to start considering this at some point. Actually, that was one of the main reasons that I entered DreamHack's contest in the first place. I enjoyed it so much that it felt like a contest where I could at least just try entering into Journeyman for the first time. Getting bumped to Masters is truly an honor. I do not have the words to express how proud and thankful I am. But this win needs to be a turning point for me. Don't get me wrong. When I look at my Love and Deepspace cosplay, I absolutely love what I see. The perfectionist in me wants to pick at the mistakes and devalue my craftsmanship. The fact of the matter is that I have to start putting value in not just my cosplays, but my ability to make them. I have to remind myself that I know what I'm doing. The whole reason I'm saying this is that I don't think I'm alone in this. I think ideally there's probably a medium where you push yourself just enough to learn new tricks and improve your craft, but you're not constantly hanging on your mistakes. The conclusion that I've come to with this build is I don't think my Love and Deepspace cosplay is perfect, whatever that means, but it was the absolute best I could make with the knowledge and the experience and the resources that I had at the moment I started making the cosplay. And in my mind, it's my cosplay, so if I like it, that's good enough for me. Wow, at this point, I'm not even making YouTube videos, I'm just making movies. Like, am I ever gonna make a video that's shorter than 30 minutes? The answer is no. I like to talk. So I've worn this costume to 2 different cons. I wore it to DreamHack to compete, and then I wore it to MomoCon because I wanted to go to the Love and Deepspace meet. And I don't really have that many bad things to say about wearing it. I mean, it's hot, but I mean, that's kind of just a thing with all cosplay, to be honest. I would say the thing that I was the most unhappy with was actually the bloomers. They did not stay dry like the entire day. So when I wore them to MomoCon, I just wore like a different pair of shorts that were a lot more breathable. But overall, I'm really happy with the comfortability of this cosplay. I know from the outside looking in, it seems like I spent hundreds of dollars and months of my life to making a silly cosplay based off of a silly gacha game. But not to get too personal about what's going on in my life, this cosplay kind of represents a pretty big phase in my life that I'm going through, and I am seeing this cosplay as like when I'm in the future, I want to be able to look on this cosplay, know why I made it, but then reflect fondly on it. Like I did something positive with a dark time in my life, if you will. So here it is. This is my art, and thank you for letting me showcase it. And I bet you're wondering, Kamiko has a really big sword in that showcase. I wonder how she made that. Well, my friends, you will also be getting a video on that big sword. So, see you in a week. And I hope you, yes you, have a wonderful day.